What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Event Marketing Redefined. I am Matt Kleinrock, CEO of Rockway Exhibits and Events, and today we have a really cool show. I have Christine Sionne with me, and she is the Senior Trade Show Manager at Hunter Industries, and we are going to have a really cool conversation about leaving events and sort of the end of her career here and how she is training her protege. And we're also going to be discussing a little bit about lessons from her career. So, Christine, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Christine, last time we talked, we had a really good conversation, and I think we were catching up a little bit because you attended our event. And
Yes.
then we were talking about doing this podcast. And one of my favorite things that like really stuck out when I was talking to you, because we were talking about your career and how it started and, you know, where you are now and the transition. But I loved something that you kind of described for me, and I would love for you to talk about it a little bit, which is you talked about when you came into the role at Hunter Industries, the way that you sort of just put yourself out there and taking control of the trade shows. Like you were like, you know, there's a lot of, especially young women in the events industry, that the term imposter syndrome comes up a lot of times. But you and I got in this conversation and you were just describing to me like the things you were doing, the limits you were pushing. And I would love for you to just talk a little bit about like that mentality and like the beginning of your career, because I thought it was so cool.
Well, I think in the early days, I was too stupid to know any better. First off, right? You're young, it's a new career.
Yeah.
I'm super excited. I got
Yep.
recruited, if you will. So
Yep.
you're kind of young but I think ultimately I still am myself and I just would not settle for what they needed me to do. I went on making myself indispensable. I wasn't afraid
Mm,
to ask questions from anybody if I didn't know. I wasn't afraid to state what I thought was best. I think with regards to events, I'm a military brat. I moved most of my young life. I can pack a booth like nobody in our company. I pay a lot of attention to detail and I'm really comfortable around strangers. And what I realized is that nobody in our marketing department wanted to deal with the logistics of trade shows, right?
mhm.
It's hard. It's hard work. And I think I saw an opportunity for myself where I could create a career with skills that I had already had, unrelated to the industry I was in. And I just actively pursued that goal.
I love that.
When you think about it, especially with young companies, right? I think my company was 8 years old when I started with them. Back then, no one gave you training. We didn't have onboarding. They didn't show you
Yeah.
the ropes. Basically, said, here's an exhibitor kit. Our first show's in 2 months. You
Get to
read
it.
through it and you figure out what you need to do or who you need to call. But over a couple of years, that got really mechanical for me. And I realized it wasn't enough, right? So I had already trained and worked in the interior design industry where a lot of ASID designers for probably 5 or 6 years. I had been running a commercial photo lab at Andre's Photo Lab, which is where I got in touch with Bill Hunter because he was one of my internal customers. And I'd worked for so many in-house advertising agencies and marketing companies and things that I knew there was more out there and I wanted more out of my job. So I just realized you got to take control of your career.
I love that. You know, well, you said making myself indispensable. I think that's such a good term where, especially nowadays, when you look at the job market and you look at the tech companies and you see the layoffs that happen and you see young people lose, I mean, not even young people, everybody losing their jobs. And I think that's really good advice for young people that are entering the job market and going to companies. If your number one goal is to make yourself indispensable, then you're looking for things like you said, like logistics. Like who's not doing logistics at this company? No one wants to do it. It's a part of the job. I'm going to own it and I'm going to crush it. Like I'm going to be so good at it. And I think that mentality that you had was really, really cool. And then I think that kind of takes me a little bit of this idea about where you're at now when it comes to the trade shows. As you moved on in your career and running the trade shows, you've kind of gotten a seat at the table at the company when it comes to, you know, these events, how they get executed, why they get executed, the goals, the alignment. So how do you think you got there?
I think I just was comfortable taking things in my own hands. And again, in the early days, nobody really knew how to run a trade show. It was about packing all of your product up and sending it to the show. Most of us own some small components or whatever, right? And we'd set all of our product up and then we would just try to talk product, product, product. And at our company, it started getting to be so much product. Every product manager wanted to show every product in their line. And it was just kind of overwhelming, right? So I realized that I had to be, I guess, more of a leader in that arena. And I had to start letting people know what was more effective for us and start getting away from all of the product, start building more campaigns around what it is that we wanted to tell. And, stories didn't come out until about 10 years ago, but we were trying
Yeah.
to tell stories 20 years ago, just different media, different. There's so many more tools and things available
Yeah.
now than there was 20 or 30 years ago when I started. So I'm going to say a lot of it is I was just too stupid to really know any better. And I was comfortable sticking my neck out on a line because the worst thing somebody could tell me was no. My dad told me no all the time.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it was just easy for me once I felt comfortable that I knew what I was doing, that I could do what they needed better than anybody else. Then it was about, okay, let's learn the real tricks of the trade, right? Let's learn about our customers and our pain points and what sales deals with in the field. Let's get out there and start examining what things that we need to actually be effective at, not just showing product. And so I think that's kind of how it started. I just was never satisfied with what we had and always felt that we could do better. So since nobody really stopped me, right? I didn't
Mhm.
get
Yeah.
objections. The more I did, the more they gave me to do. So that indirectly was permission.
Yeah. For a lack of a better term, it just kind of sounds like grabbing the bull by the horns, right? It
That's
just kind of
exactly
gives,
what I did.
it's just like that is something that I think I don't want to say, I hate comparing generations and getting into that discussion, but essentially like that is something at a company, at a job. Like if you are constantly seeking how to find problems, solve them, doing things that others don't want to do. And when I say grabbing the bull by the horns, it's basically saying, like, I'm going to take whatever you give me, I'm going to do it incredibly well, and I'm going to make it better. And I'm going to ask you sometimes, and sometimes I'm not going to ask you. And that is something that's just like such an important part of when you're working that I think, I don't want to say it gets lost today, right? Like, I don't want to say that it gets lost, but I think it's pivotal as people are entering in their careers, especially event people, pivotal that they jump in there and they grab the bull by the horns, which I like. Tell me a little bit about, you were talking about campaigns, right? Kind of got into from the trade show side, the logistics. Everybody wants to show product. Now you're flooding the trade shows with product. Everybody wants to bring it, set it up, have those conversations. And then you started thinking a little bit deeper about what does a campaign look like? How do we really tell the story of Hunter Industries? Give me a little bit of that.
Well, I was a junior marketing coordinator at the time. And what I realized is that I didn't have enough education to be telling people who had been working at the company more than I had why we should do things differently. So I think I stepped back a little bit and realized that if I could educate myself more and find
Mm-hmm.
opportunities for me as a trade show person, not trying to get my certifications in irrigation design and all of the other things so our company actually pays you to get certified in the
That's great.
irrigation industry. But I was, as a irrigation individual in the trade show arena, I was looking for trade show education,
Mm.
right? So I could stand above anybody else that was in our company and certainly our competition. I still don't believe our competition sends their people out and educates them more. So I think I realized I needed to be more educated and understand everybody's pain points before I can kind of direct them on what to do. And as I started slowly, because we didn't have a lot of money, so I might be able to take a couple classes here, a couple classes there. But as I started finding like Exhibitor Live and the CTSM program and starting getting into those classes and realizing I probably have a little bit more background than I was comfortable with sharing, that gave me the confidence to start letting people know we're not doing things 100% right, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
doing a lot of things that our competitors are doing. So we're certainly standing in line with them at our trade shows, but we're not doing everything we can do to be bringing more customers in, to be telling our stories out to the world and not just in our little itty bitty trade show. And that I think is really when it helped me, because the more my confidence increased, the more comfortable
Mhm.
I felt telling people, yeah, we really should have a theme. Like it was so hard to get a theme in our booth. What do we need a theme for? Well, because
Yeah.
we can tell a story around it. We can write a campaign. We have collateral. But initially people were like, just show them the big valve that we just created, right? So
Yeah.
it took a couple of years, honestly, to get upper management to kind of understand that we can do better than everybody else if we can increase our knowledge of how to actually participate in trade show marketing. And the next thing was like, we didn't have goals. Nobody ever
Mhm.
gave me a goal, right? The next thing I realized is that if I didn't set my own goals so that I kind of knew where I was starting from and where I was going to and had benchmarks to increase and get better benefits and shows down the road, I was kind of missing out. So I
Mhm.
just started calling meetings and setting goals and letting people go, okay, based on what I've heard from everybody, these are the things we're trying to accomplish. So I'm going to say we want to get 100 leads at this show, and hopefully 80 of them will be pre-qualified. And we're going to do that because we're going to have some engagements in our booth where we're either going to play some games or talk about this or whatever that might look like. But it was really slow going initially because people didn't want to play that game with me.
What was so from that, like that kind of campaign side, which what I would say is becoming more sophisticated in your events,
Oh,
what
yeah.
was the pushback like? Like when you started presenting to people, because I think some of that still exists today, where companies are going to trade shows and they're like, well, we've always gone. We always go. Our competitors go. Like those are the answers. And then when people start talking about like, well, okay, we need to make sure that the ideal customer is there. We need to have a meaningful way to engage with them, follow up. We need a strategy to tell our story. We have to convert these conversations into leads, into pipeline. When people start talking in that language, there is pushback. Like, what was the pushback like back then when you first started doing it? And how did you handle that pushback?
Well, initially, say, for example, just starting to create some campaigns and some themes. Initially, the struggle was such that I felt like I was kind of always fighting with my marketing team. So what I did is I asked if I could start reporting to the creative development manager and team. And I started working with the creative development team because that allowed me to kind of understand a little bit more why we set up themes. I could strategically work with them to come up with the ideas ahead of
Yeah.
time. So when I went and sat at a meeting and said, okay, everybody, what's the overall biggest story we want to tell? Let's put a theme together. I'd get blank stares, right?
Mm.
So I started then working with a creative team internally, and we would put together some themes and ideas, two or three, some basic graphic options. It wasn't really a campaign back then, right? But it
I
was the
get it.
start
Yeah.
of how our campaigns became into existence. And then once I started working with creative and I started getting some like preliminary collateral and information, then it was easier to go back to my teams and tell that story. Look, if we have a theme that's talking about X, Y, or Z, and now we've got some graphics we can build on it. We can actually go photograph things that we want instead of just pulling things that we have in our archives, right? So I started then going out in the field I started scouting sites because a lot of the things that were shot 35 millimeter, I mean, we're talking film way back when, right? They didn't blow up big enough to even put on a decent
Mm.
graphic, right?
Yeah.
So then I had to start really focusing on, at the time, 3/4 right film, large film, 3 million. And so that gave us an
Mhm.
opportunity to shoot what we wanted specifically for our shows, not just use what somebody else had shot for whatever reason they shot it
Yeah.
for. And I think slowly, as we started doing this more and more, we started to recognize people are more interested in coming in to talk to you when you've already given them a little bit about what you want to share, right? So then they're going to come in
Yeah.
and say, hey, tell me about that new wireless valve or whatever it is
Mhm.
that I just saw in your newsletter. And so we started kind of combining things together, like using all of our collateral, little newsletter blurbs, little this is, little that's. And so it ended up starting out with internal ideas to help us tell a better story that worked far better because as I started, I've had 15 or 16 bosses since I've worked at Hunter in the
Mhm.
last 35 years. And so that is actually what helped to carry things. As I'd get a new boss or a new marketing manager would come in, then I could kind of go back and show where we had started, what we were doing now, why we had themes that we
Mm.
were using, and how it kind of helped us to carry that campaign a little bit further. Our follow-up was not good initially. We had a terrible CRM, Sugar. You couldn't really
I know.
use it.
I know sugar.
So,
I know what
and
sugar
what's really
is.
funny is
Yeah.
all of sales, everybody complained about Sugar, and then we got Salesforce. But that was only about 2 years ago. The
Yeah.
complaints really went crazy in Salesforce, but that was a tool that came mandated by our leadership team. You
Hmm.
spend so much money to get that thing set up, right?
Yeah.
So basically, it's like if you are in sales or marketing, this is the tool we are using.
Yeah.
So that lent itself really well to things that we had already been doing, right? Because now I can
Hmm.
set up campaigns in Salesforce. I can attach my leads to Salesforce. So, and everybody in our company can see that. So
Yeah.
that has helped quite a bit. I will say there is still a struggle now with our international markets. I have tried multiple times over the years to work with them in setting up themes and ideas for their show, to set up some type of an engagement and some collateral that ties into their engagement and their theme. We did it during COVID. We did a big virtual event for the EMA show, and we started then. Of
Mhm.
course, their head marketing person ended up retiring, and they got somebody new. So I'm
Just-
now working with her, and they've got two shows this year. I've been working with their international marketing coordinator as well, trying to get set up with some themes and ideas. And we all agree that we need to start doing that, but it's really tough to get them to understand kind of how and why we do it. And really, what's tough more than anything is like you come up with this great theme to knock your socks off because you're going to give away these
Mhm.
cool branded socks in a booth. Works great in a domestic market because you can talk about walking over, stepping into, or a
Yeah.
variety of different things. Doesn't work so well when you come up with a domestic theme that you think you're going to try to make an international theme, right? Things
Yeah.
don't really transfer the way that you expect them to. So now it's a little bit more about, we do a lot more translations for 20 languages or something like. So now it's picking those priority markets out and working with their coordinators to set up some campaigns and some of the tricks and tools we use domestically for them internationally, but they have to make sense, right? So that's been a big push this year, is like now getting our international team to follow suit a little bit more with what we've been doing successfully domestically.
I know for sure, just on the last bit there that you said about, cultures vary as well. So that when you're creating themes and messaging and things that you think will engage people and not, that's why it's really important in the kind of the foundation of creating engagement is truly understanding the customer, right? It's not just
Absolutely.
giving some kind of like BS profile. It's like really diving into who is your customer, right? Like, who are they? What are they seeking? What's important to them? What problems are they trying to solve? And when you have a good grip on that, you understand things like that. And then you're able to kind of deliver things that make sense to them.
But I think you also have to understand your customers also vary, right? And
Yeah.
within your whole market of customers, or you've got pockets, some that are specifiers, some that are contractors working in the field, some
Yep.
that are distributors. So you kind of have to learn how to speak with each of them as well,
Yes.
right? It's
Yeah.
not just one customer. And kind of a good example of that is we're always trying new engagements and new ideas. And we meet with a team. I don't do anything in a silo, right? I meet with a team, and we were coming up with some ideas for our new booth, and we had this huge 16-foot blade wall, and the creative team really wanted to do some social media marketing. And I had kind of cautioned them because our irrigation association show, first of all, it's a bunch of old white guys,
Yeah.
right? That's who all these irrigation individuals, contractors, distributors typically are. And I kind of lost my train of thought. But I had to kind of caution them that you got to know each of your individual audiences.
Yeah.
So at one show, you might do a social media wall or something that makes perfect sense because
Hmm.
there are a lot of
Yep.
students at that
Yeah.
show. They like taking pictures of themselves and all the
Hmm.
selfies and stuff like that. So it might
Yes.
work great. But at the irrigation show, our biggest show where they wanted to do it, I tried to caution them this really isn't that customer base because they're all older than me and they don't do social media. But you don't want to nix something, right? When someone's
Yep.
creative. And so we just kind of went through with it. And I
Yeah.
realized I wasted an entire wall, a big wall, and a big space in our booth for social media activities that never happened. There might have been 6 or 7 people that wrote a few things on the
Mm.
walls. There were a
Yeah.
handful of people that took a few pictures, but our customers, the distributors, the customers, the salespeople, people that really had something to offer, they didn't play. It was not
Yeah.
their gig. And that I think just goes to show that you really have to know all of your different customers, right? Because
Yep.
what works really well at one show is not going to work at another show.
Yeah.
We did some really cool things one year where we brought massage therapists into the booth and we had a little
Mm.
section set
Yeah.
up. First, some people were a little bit uncomfortable about it, but then the first couple people started getting some massages and they were like, whoa, that was great. And then people started
Yeah.
coming in and getting massages. So we thought, wow, this was really cool. We ended up doing 50 massages. They're about 15,
Nice.
20 minutes each, right? In the course of 2 days. I thought that was a win, right? None would have been pretty bad. 5 would have been terrible, but
Mhm.
50 was pretty darn good.
I
So
agree.
at our
Yeah.
golf show the following year, or 2 years later, we were trying to talk about different engagements and we were talking about making life easier for them because our new widget or whatever it was made your life easier and you could just sit back and relax and let us do all that work. So it was, well, okay, well, this is a great opportunity. Let's pull in some massage. They didn't like the idea of the massage therapist. So we brought in some massage chairs. Totally
Yeah.
bombed. It
That's
totally
awesome.
bombed. That was not the market, right?
Yeah.
But you don't know if you don't try things. You don't want to be
Yeah.
predictable. You don't want to get stagnant. So you just have to try some things.
Yeah. You know what's funny about you saying that is like I've had it both ways where we're working with a company that does multiple trade shows and we're almost identifying different audiences in each one. And they are different, whether they're a distributor, partner, end user, someone's the key stakeholder, it's an executive versus maybe somebody that's in HR, but not an executive, but they work through that person. There's always these various forms. And I find it easier show by show with specifics because you can hyper target that individual. But sometimes you have single large shows where when we're working with somebody, they're like, we see everybody there. So all of those people are there. And then you're trying to appeal to all of them and you can really go down the rabbit hole. And that is when you have to really focus on coming up with a strategy that tells a very simple story to everybody rather than having these niche little pockets to individuals because those shows are typically your biggest ones.
Well, and simple, I think, is the key there. So, this past year, I've really been trying to let things go,
Yep.
not micromanage so much, not be in control of everything because, when I do it, it's right. And I know it's going to be right.
Yeah.
Trying to get rid of all of that thought. And so, and John's been taking over more of campaigns and writing copy and, just trying to get things started because he's going to have to do that eventually himself anyhow. Our first show this year, he went a little bit crazy. So he had 3 different engagements in the booth. It was a 3-day show, which is a little bit long for us.
Mhm.
And I cautioned at first, I was like, I think there's so much going on right now. It's going to be really hard to follow. But we had a good plan for
Mhm.
in-house
Yeah.
activations. We were going to have a bar there. So we wanted to give some raffle prizes away during the happy hour. And then we really were getting a lot of people. This is a new customer base for us. So we wanted to really push our demo kit because it's something that they can take in the field, set up a demo, leave it someone's house, and come back a weekend later. And they don't want them to take those lights away, right? So
Yeah. Of course.
so he's like, okay, well then we can do this during happy hour. Then let's have a whole 2-day event where people could just go to a separate QR code, find answers for stuff in the booth, fill out a survey for their
Mhm.
scavenger hunt information, and then we'll select one of those people to win the demo kit at the end of the show. Well, when we set everything up and had our booth meeting, got all of our staff into the show, even though we had done a virtual booth meeting 2 weeks earlier, kind of explained the different engagements at what we were doing, right? It's one thing to hear about them, it's another thing to see them and stand
Yeah.
in the booth. And all of a sudden, our staff was like going, there's so many QR codes. Which event are we, what activation are we using? What are
Yeah.
we doing? So initially, my thought was, I'm just going to cut this off at the copy stage. No, we're not going to do this. No, we're not. And then I went, well, darn it. How did I learn? I
Yeah.
didn't learn because someone told
It's
me
great.
no. I learned because I did stupid stuff, and
Yeah.
stupid stuff makes you learn. So I
Yeah.
kind of sat back. I did tell my boss, I was like, look, I'm letting go, right? I got 2 years. I'm letting go. So there's some things I'm not 100% comfortable
Hmm.
with at this show, but it isn't going to kill us, right?
No.
And so I'm going to let it go. It was a perfect learning opportunity because after the show, when John and I were there, kind of before the labors came the next morning, we were going through things. I could say things like, well, you saw our staff kind of was a little bit confused, right? I think we just had too many things going on at this show, John.
Hmm.
So, what do you think would have been best for us to do?
Yeah.
And then he could, after being at the show, hearing all the feedback from sales and himself being a little bit frustrated because you got too damn many people. This
Yeah.
is a big show for us. Our irrigation shows are typically not that exciting, but
Yeah.
the AV shows a completely different market, a new customer. So it wasn't going to kill us. It didn't kill us, but it made him understand, holy moly, I cannot have three different
Yeah.
engagements in a single space and expect anyone to have a clue of what we're doing. That was the best teacher. I could have
Hmm.
cut him down and shut everything off, and we'd
Yeah.
have had a great, perfect show, and we wouldn't have learned shit.
That's a great. So just so everybody knows, we're talking. John is Christine's protege who will take over her role as she retires. What, in 2 years, Christine?
Yeah, just over 2 years now.
Yeah. So that's a great example and a great story of that you have to let people fail. You have to let people make mistakes. And I would
You
say
hired
one of
them,
the
right?
thing,
Because they were qualified.
yeah, yeah,
Right. And so, and that's another thing. He's way more educated than I am, but he doesn't know the tricks and tips about our
yeah,
industry. And he really doesn't know trade shows. So he's kind of learning, but he's way more qualified. He just needs that experience.
yeah.
So I think that's the first couple of years I kind of oh, let's do this. Let's do, I kind of
Hmm.
stated where we would go, but now I'm realizing that if I only have 2 years left, then I'm going to be a lot more effective for him
Yep.
if I can just let him fall on his face a few times.
Without a doubt, that's how people learn. That's how people
It's really
learn
hard.
best.
Personally, it is so hard. We're
Hmm.
working on a new engagement right now. So, just a little backstory. Our sports turf show tends to have a lot of students at this show. And so we're at the sports turf show, and he came up with a really fun engagement the year before. So we have this giant valve box that they put huge, like 2 foot heads into. And the valve
Hmm.
box has these really large holes on the top of it. So they came up with, because we're trying to tie our product into things, right? So they
Yeah.
took one of the tops of this valve box off and set it up against the wall, and they were chipping foam golf balls into this hole. They're two size holes so they could get different points. It was a lot of fun. It was relatively mild in the booth.
Hmm. Yeah.
So next year we kind of flip off from show to show. He did engagement for that show this year. So I gave him a few other shows, newer shows to do engagement. And I picked up this one and I thought, well, I got a great idea. These people were lined up like crazy to chip that stupid little ball into the hole. Let's play rotor pong, right? Students, beer pong. It's like there's a tie in here. So we took a bunch of our heads, we set them up like like bowling alley, and people were bouncing balls, bouncing branded ping pong balls
Nice.
into these rotors. It got way messy. Like balls were
Yeah.
popping everywhere. I know the booth on the left of us was a little bit irritated. Our staff was getting a little bit frustrated and irritated, but we had so much fun with it, right?
Hmm.
Just getting the competition going, chasing after balls. Okay, so we learn, hey, ping pong balls are probably too unpredictable to use at a trade show. But I guarantee you, next year they're going to come into our booth and want to know what stupid game we're doing this year. So John has got this idea. He wants to build, those sticks that drop, right? The catch game. So he
Yeah.
wants to build one using our rotors. So he goes to engineering. First, he goes to the product manager. And he just says, is this a good idea? Well, the product manager goes straight to engineering and gets our engineering team designing magnets and things that will drop and do all this stuff. So John comes back to me. He's like, it's kind of getting out of hand. I just asked if it was a good idea. Now engineering's doing this and so and so's doing that. And I'm like, well, they're internal, right? If they're charging you a lot of money, then it's something we need to look at. But if they're just having fun and playing too, let's see what they
Yeah.
come up with.
Hmm.
So now he's got great idea of what to do. He's trying to work with our graphic designers to come up with a plan. And I told him 4 times, you need to go to the fabricator first because there's going to be
Hmm.
limitations on materials, on what he can and
Yeah.
can't do with electrical wires. And so go to the fabricator first. Well, he keeps going to everybody else and he keeps going to the designers. And last week, I'm like ready to pull my hair out and I'm thinking to myself, I'm just going to draw this damn thing up and go talk to my fabricator. And I had to stop myself
Yeah.
right there.
Yep.
And I looked right at him. I love working with him because I can really just be myself and direct. And he does not take offense to it in any way. So we worked
It's
well
great.
together. We also worked very well together in Toastmasters for 3 years. As we started getting into leadership, he and I kind of did the same things over and we worked really well together, which was how I realized he would be a great successor down the line in the
Mm.
long run, because I had worked with him for years prior to that. But I realized, you know what? Look, John, you're going to have fun with this, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not approving anything until I get some dollars and cents with it. And if you come back to
Hmm.
me, it's going to be $4,000. I'm going to say no. So if
Hmm.
you can work with someone, build it, get it designed, and you can do it for less than $2,000, I don't have a problem with it. But now you got to start talking to people and getting me money. The show is
Yeah.
January,
Yeah.
right? And so now I'm just like giving him parameters. I'm going to let you do what you want to do. I think it's a wee bit crazy right now because you've talked about it for 4 months and nothing is still done. Nothing is done yet. So I'm like, pull my hair out, right? I like things done early.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm like, you know what? It's another really great opportunity for either him to do super well and tell me to shut up,
Yep.
or for him to drop some
Yeah.
things and learn. Maybe you have to step back a little bit, listen a little bit more, and follow some instructions that someone gave you because they've been through those ropes
Yeah.
before. But I'm not doing that right now. I will tell him, like I told him the other day, John, you know I'm ready to start just drawing this damn thing out myself, right? And he laughed a little bit and I go, but I'm
Yeah.
not going to. You're going to figure this out. And when it's like the week before the show and you're in your garage trying to build it, I'm going to be telling you I told you so.
That's it. I like that approach though, honestly, because I think you start talking about you have to let people fly. You have to let them do the work. You have to let them come up with the idea, learn how to ideate something, how to troubleshoot something, how to execute something. So I think it's really good advice for anybody that's mentoring somebody or even managing somebody, right? There's a lot of people that are in your seat that are running a team of 3 or 4 or 2 underneath them. And it's distributing that responsibility and then saying, hey, I'm going to let you do your thing and not stopping them when you see trouble down the road. Just letting them go a little bit because most people, when they are running with things, they have the best of intention. They just have to learn
Absolutely.
a little bit. And people self-actualize most through experience,
Well, and
not
I
not
think
through being told.
in this particular case, I think letting him know too, there are some limitations, like, and
Yeah.
budget is going to be a big one, right? And so
Hmm.
that also, and timing. So once I kind of like, okay, I'm letting you do what you do, but you need to be within this and you got X amount of time. Then he kind of stepped back and he's like, okay, now I can see
Yeah.
he's like revisiting how he wants to approach this. And I'm sure he's going to do a great job. I don't even
Yeah.
question it. And, with any luck, the rotors won't be dropping into other people's booths or dropping on
Yep.
people's feet or stuff like that. So it's a little bit crazy. And because I thought it was really such a good idea, and another team member, a salesperson on our team, suggested, well, if you can build one of those, it'd be really cool if we could use it for regional shows, right? Because regional engagements are hard. They don't have the
Yeah.
money to do the campaigns that we
Yep.
do. They don't have the money for all of the different promotional items and stuff. So regionally, we give them some engage templates, we give them some ideas, but that's all their
Mhm.
budget. So they're definitely limited. So this could be a great tool, especially
Yeah.
if it only costs us $2,500 to build something and we can use it for a year or two at our other shows. That's a
Yeah.
win for me, right? That's a huge win.
Christine, so one of the things that like is like a recurring theme for me that comes up with your career is what I said earlier about kind of like, you know, kind of taking the bull by the horns, right? And I feel like you have that personality where you have a comfort doing it. It's almost been your instinct your whole career, where when you get in, you're looking to take whatever it is that you have and do more with it. You're looking to push boundaries. What kind of advice would you give a young event marketer that maybe doesn't have your personality, but you and I both know that grabbing the bull by the horns in your role at a company is a surefire way of having success.
Well, I think I would just tell them to find a way to make yourself indispensable,
Mm,
right? I
yeah.
mean, people love working with people who are going to make their job easier. So I found my strengths in being able to make life easier for other people. And if I took on the responsibility of the trade show, I took on full responsibility of that show. I
Yeah.
started with product lists, so I knew exactly what I was going to have there. I didn't want any surprises. Then we worked in themes and campaigns, and I think that I ended up making myself, I guess, for lack of a better term, an expert, right, in the industry. And I would tell them, sit back, listen, and learn those pain points. Learn them of your market, your in-house teams, what leadership has to deal with. And then when you come back to the table, always come with solutions, not more problems. Because oftentimes younger people I find come with all of the problems, but they haven't taken any time to seek guidance and figure out what they might do to solve those before they just come to somebody and ask for help solving a problem, right?
Yeah.
So that's, I think, where I really stood above the rest, is that I always came with the solution. It may not have been the right one, but I came with solutions. So I looked
Mhm.
like I kind of knew what I was doing, even if I didn't know what I was doing,
Yeah.
right? I just never went without a solution. And then when you can, you take on additional projects that get you out of your comfort zone. I wasn't a creative person, so I asked to go to the creative department, right?
Mhm.
And you learn a little bit more about your markets and yourself, and then what you're made of. Those things really help build your confidence too.
Mhm.
And then you can sit back and be a little bit more strategic about how you present your ideas. Because if you've already done that work and you're backing yourself up, those doors will open. Oftentimes not in the time frame we want them to. So you have to have some patience as well. But when the doors don't open for you, you can do two things. You can sit back and chuck it up to, oh, well, I tried. Or you can go to the back door and then there's windows. Sometimes you must wait for the right opportunity and try a few doors. That is
Mhm.
some of the best advice I was ever given by the creative development manager that I went to work for when I asked if I could go to creative. She basically taught me, look, you don't, you have to have the persistence to know what you're talking about and be able to back yourself up. And if you know you're right and you don't get in that first time, there are multiple doors and windows. You just got to
Mhm.
find your timing and figure out when to go through them. And I don't know if you can tell or not, but I am pretty damn persistent. So if I think there's something right, if I know there's something right, it might take 1, 2, 3 years, but I
Yeah.
start by planting seeds early, right? Trying to explain all of the different options and the whys. And then I just wait and see. And when that doesn't work, they'll come back a little bit later and we'll try another angle and we'll try another angle. And if it's the right thing, the angles work and you do eventually get what you need. But I think there's a couple of things. You have to really come to the table with solutions, make yourself as indispensable as possible. I worked with people who just, they get more projects, they complain and complain and complain. I should be getting more money. I should this, wham, 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 I'm doing this, that, and the other thing. And I would say, if you just do the work
Yeah.
and you show them you can do it, you'll get those results. But
Yeah.
if you start crying from day one about how you're not getting everything that's due to you and you haven't even delivered any results, you're just setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah. It's really good kind of life advice there. I like the doors and windows thing because I believe that's true, but I think it's not just telling people to just go banging and knocking on doors and windows and trying to push through. It's saying
No, no, no.
show up prepared, show up ready to
Absolutely.
go, show up with answers, show up with ideas, show up with initiative, show up with like, hey, I have figured this out, or at least I think I have. Here's what I want to present. Here is what my ideas are. And here's what I'm thinking. And I think people like that ultimately get let through windows and doors not necessarily because of the persistence, but because they are prepared, and people like people that are prepared and presenting things that make sense and presenting things that will progress things further down the line.
Well, I think also initially, especially when we're young, we just want everything, right? So we go in there with
Yeah.
like this just great big long list of needs that you haven't learned is really not practical, right? So
Mm-hmm.
timing is absolutely everything. I learned that it really helps for me to plant seeds ahead of time. I'm good at seeing the need for something before it really exists, right? So I
Got it.
think that's
Yeah.
a strength. And so oftentimes, here's a perfect example. We needed a new regional booth. We had gone from most of our regional shows being 10 by 10 pop-up stuff, and we were starting to do some larger 20 by 20 regional shows. We needed a booth that actually worked with the new brand and the new booth that we had purchased, but I really couldn't spend another $100,000, right? So I was trying to figure out, how do I get a new booth regionally that's going to stand up and make as much presence and show as well as we do on our national level? So I put a budget together. I worked with our in-house marketing team and leadership department, and I was approved for $50,000, right? And for 3 years, I put that $50,000 on the budget. And every year, the financial CFO was like, nope, I know it was approved. Nope, nope, no. And it kept being like,
Yeah.
and I was like, but we really need a new booth. So what I found is that sometimes things don't happen for a reason. And by waiting those 3 years, one of our booth houses actually lost one of our booths.
Mm-hmm.
So what that gave me was the ability to now talk to them about replacing my booth with new AluVision equipment. When I
Yeah.
thought I was going to be buying some B Matrix to kind of incorporate with my Octanorm booth, and it didn't work out. But what worked out is we got a brand new AluVision booth for free, mind you, because they had
Nice.
to replace my existing
Yeah.
booth. And Hunter is in such a better position now
Mm.
because I didn't push to get something that really, I mean, we needed it, but if I'd
Yeah.
have pushed, I'd ended up with not bad, but I would have ended up with
Yeah.
less
I get it.
than perfect, right? And
Yeah.
now what I have is heaven. It's beautiful. I couldn't
Love it.
have planned that out any better. So thank you, Stephanie, CFO, for telling me no for 3 years, because it just made me keep looking at better
Mm-hmm.
options. And what we got was a much better option for Hunter Industries.
Christine, what do you think about, so when you came in the industry and you started doing trade shows, you learned the logistics of it, right? And then you sort of began to grow things. And that was a certain time and a certain place. And, you know, where trade shows and events, I think, were kind of on the rise. They were just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Tell me now, if you were 25, 28, 30 years old and you were walking into an event manager, trade show manager, director of event type job, you had a little bit of experience, you kind of knew what you were doing, and they handed you the keys. What are you seeing in the B2B event space now and the trade shows that maybe if you had another 20 years left in your career wise, you were like, this is what I'm doing. These are the things I would focus on. These are the trends I'm spotting. This is what I would kind of begin to tinker with. What would you be looking to do?
Well, I guess in a perfect world, I would probably be trying to get more digital motion type technology in my booth that wasn't a video monitor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard because the expense that comes with a lot of that is really hard to swallow. And so, because we own a lot of our assets, something like that, I would pitch to rent or try out 1 or 2 ways. It would require now creating content specific for your event.
Yeah.
A lot of the content we use in our events, we have a huge in-house video department and creative department. So a lot of content we use is regurgitated content, right? Because they're launching products all the time. They're creating new content all the time. So we're using that content there. But I think ultimately to take our shows to another level, it would be utilizing the technology that's available now and telling our stories in a much more professional manner with the content that we have available. And I'm also finding with our shows, we didn't used to do a lot of happy hours and events in the booth. We
Hmm.
would, for new products and things, we would oftentimes do stuff offsite. But I'm finding that there is a real value and beauty of having some of those happy hours and events within our space and getting more of like the like customers together to speak with each other and share information. Typically, the people that are going to come there, if they know you already, they're there because they want to be there. So they're going to be telling
Yeah.
good stories and good experiences that they've had with you, right? And so there's nothing better than hearing from another customer how well something worked for them
Yeah.
versus us telling them how great we are all the time. So I think I would, if I had a little bit more time, those are the things that I would lean towards. Definitely the technology. Geez, 25 years ago, they didn't have technology, right?
No.
This younger generation has such incredible tools available to them. I mean, not only technology that they can do showing in a booth, but for example, I think, for the first 10 years I was there, everything we did was essentially direct mail. And in the early days, we basically assembled our own direct mail and sent it out, right? And that was super costly. But now you have email marketing and email opportunities
Yeah.
that you can track what your customers are doing just by sending them an
Yeah.
email. So the technology that's available gives us so much power as exhibit managers, but you have to know how to harness it, right?
Hmm.
And so I think that's what I would do. And I would say the next thing I would really spend and focus time on is effective follow up. For example, and this is something that I really need to work with John on because, he just wants to get leads and he engages everybody and captures all these leads. But sometimes the leads that we're capturing aren't necessarily the leads that we want, right?
Yeah.
So for the first couple years,
Oh
it
yeah.
was, yeah, I know you're scanning a lot, but John, are you having conversations with them? Are they the people that we want scanned? We don't want them just to come in and scan them if they're all blow and
Yeah.
go people, right? We want them to be installers. So learning that customer base, and that's something he'll do a little bit more over time as he's
Yeah.
mastering all the trade show stuff. But yeah, I think we just have so much more opportunity with the technology that's available to us in how we show and how we respond in what we offer. And that is going to really take trade shows to a much greater level.
You know what I find interesting about that answer about asking what you would do now and then talking earlier about what you did before that I really like is two things that come to mind on what you were talking about, between, the digital and the tech and then happy hours inside the booth and, just these different ideas of things that you would focus on is, and then what you did in the past is you were still trying to tell stories and engage your customer at the core of it. Like I think at the core of an event as a company, you are trying to tell your story and you are trying to engage your customer. That story has to be compelling. That story has to solve problems. That story has to connect with the customer. And then when you go to engage your customer, I think that's one of the most important things you can do. How are you going to engage with them? How are you going to spend your face-to-face time with them? So I think your mindset has typically been the same, which is great. Everything around you has maybe changed, but you are still trying to, at the core, tell stories and engage your customer when you're going to an event, which tells me, that you've had a good career of fully understanding the job.
Just built for certain things. And
Yeah.
when I was offered the job at Hunter, and at the time I even asked Bill Hunter, well, what are you going to have me do? Because they were on a hiring freeze. They didn't even have a job open, right?
Yeah.
And he goes, well, I don't really know, but I know good people when I see them, and I want you
Smart.
working for me. So we
Smart.
are going to figure it out. And I think just the confidence of having somebody
Yeah.
recruit you in and tell you things you didn't know about yourself, right? It kind of put a little step in my, yeah, a little bit of a jump in my step, and it allowed me to tap into the who I was more because I knew me and I trusted me and I didn't know my industry. I didn't know this customer base. I didn't know anything about it. I came from photography and interior design, right?
Mm.
I would have had no idea in my life that somehow or another all the photography I'd done and all the interior design would sum me up to have a 30-year career at a corporation. And I've
Super
had
cool.
many conversations with some of my friends. One of my dearest friends owns her own company. And I remember telling me how proud she was of things I'd done. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You own your own company. You're successful. You
Yeah.
do all these great things. She goes, yes, but you're doing exactly what's right for you and you flourish from it. So to have other people notice that, it's really a feather in your cap.
Yeah.
You know, I one time I asked an editor of Landscape Architecture magazine, why do you always contact me when you have trade show questions? We have so many exhibit managers and people that execute trade shows in our industry, but I noticed over 3 or 4 years he always reached out to me when he had specific questions about trade shows. And he goes, well, don't you know? And I'm like, don't I know what? He goes, when you call the Irrigation Association and ask them for input, they just tell us to call you. And I
That's
was like,
great.
oh, I had no idea, right?
That's good stuff.
That all the things that I did were not only helping me to grow, but were building a reputation I didn't even
Mhm.
know I had.
Yeah, that's really good stuff, Christine. I appreciate you taking time to have this conversation. I think you dropped a lot of really great stuff and kind of like career advice for younger people that are getting into events. You know, the grabbing the bull by the horns thing for me is just such a big one. And your career to me is comes as such an example of that instinct and just pushing and doing as a path for success. So, I appreciate you doing this, and I wish you the best as you make this transition. It seems like you're having fun with it. It seems like you're pulling a lot of the right strings with John, and he'll be set up for success.
Yeah, he's going to do a great job. It's kind of
Yeah.
scary. I walked into my first booth 2 weeks ago that I wasn't involved with setting up or like
Yeah.
a lot of the major planning. And I walked in there and I went, holy shit, they don't even need me anymore.
Yeah.
That was my first reaction,
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good
which
thing.
is
That's a
kind of
good
a
thing.
double-edged
Yeah.
sword, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It means you're doing your job. It means you're doing your job.
Yeah, hopefully. And also, just because I retire from Hunter, I I'm not the kind of person that can't do. I just, doers do.
Yeah.
That's what we do, right? I
Yeah.
just need to do other things, right? So like, someday my son might start a robotics company. I'll do his marketing but in the meantime, I did apply and get accepted to teach a succession training class at Exhibitor Live next
That's
next
awesome.
March. And
Good.
I'm trying to now set myself for things that I can do in retirement, like maybe teach a few classes 4 times a year or stay involved. Like I'm really excited about your EMC next July.
Nice.
Hopefully I will
Thank
still
you.
be
Yeah.
invited since I am not
Of
actually
course.
retired yet, because I think the industry really needs what you're doing, Matt. And what
Thank you.
I did searching with Exhibitor Live and all these diff TSEA and stuff to try to take classes. The classes were great. They give you a lot of background. But once you're done and you're in that senior level in this trade show space
Mhm.
and event space, there really isn't anyone to sit and brainstorm and
Mhm.
collectively
Yeah.
work all that stuff out. And so I thought by becoming a Diamond CTSM member that I would be in this exclusive group of people that like networked and worked with each other. But I find oftentimes I get into those little meetings and it just seems like kind of a giant bitch session. And that's not what I'm looking for, right? I'm looking for what are tools out there and people out
Yeah. You
there
want to
that I
collaborate. Yeah.
can grow and collaborate
Yeah.
with and do better things, right? And
Yeah.
so I can't thank you enough for, I don't even know how I got invited. Talk about imposter syndromes. I was pretty blown away about that
Yeah.
one. And then I said something to my girlfriend when we were practicing for this. And I said, I don't even know why they want to interview. And she's like, seriously, Christine. And, but, it's like, it is that kind of imposter syndrome. Even
Yeah.
35 years later, I still feel like I don't belong here, but I know I have earned every bit of it, right? I didn't do
Mhm.
it because it was on someone else's laurels. But in the back of my head, I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I really belong here.
Nah, you
It's so
belong here.
funny.
You belong here. Well, thanks for doing this today. I greatly appreciate it. I think you did awesome. You dropped some great stuff. I would tell you, I think you should find a mentee. I know you have John right now, but as you move forward and move on, like finding somebody that you can mentor, I think you would be great at it, just based on the tell signs of our discussion and all your experience and wealth of knowledge and events. And it might be something that fills your bucket a little bit.
Yeah, that's dynamite. I did it quite a bit when I was going through my CTSM program, but I do feel like I have a little bit more to give. I'm not ready to just
For
like
sure.
throw the towel in it and quit because I'm not going to be working 40 hours
Yeah.
a week. So that's something I think that I'll be looking and pursuing a little bit more as
Cool.
I get closer to retirement.
Great.
Thank you for the
Well,
opportunity,
this
Matt.
was
I
a
really do
blast. Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for doing it.
Have a great day.